always, the sponsor of this episode is Knights of the Raritan, the Rutgers NIL Collective. Click on the link in the description of this episode to join their free newsletter. Let you know what's going on within the organization. They have a lot of things coming up for the school year, as well as they give updates on Rutgers athletics as a whole, and learn how to become a member to help Rutgers student athletes with NIL. Thursday, did an episode on appreciating Corey Sanders and what he did at Rutgers for the men's basketball in the early years of the Steve Pikiell tenure. This episode, as luck would have it, just in terms of content in July, the greatest kick returner in Rutgers football history, Janarion Grant, has now produced 2 special teams touchdowns in consecutive games in the CFL for now the Toronto Argonauts. Played his first 4 seasons with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and wanted to just appreciate Janarion Grant for what he meant to Rutgers. It was a bittersweet ending at the end. You know, he obviously suffered some injuries and didn't end his career the way he surely wanted it to. But talk about one of the most electric players to ever play for the Scarlet Knights. And it's just great to see him at any professional level to still have success like he is. So wanted to note too, last week, for the second time in his career, he returned a punt against the greatest punter in Rutgers history, Adam Korsak, who did not allow a touchdown returned against him in his entire college career, but has now allowed 2 Janarion Grant touchdowns in the CFL. Perhaps that is appropriate. If it's going to happen, it happens to the greatest returner in Rutgers history in Janarion Grant. Let's just go through the record books a little bit in terms of what he means, because I do think, as much as fans know that followed the team closely in that time period, he was as close to magic as there was on the football field. If he touched the ball, anything could happen. And I will say, one of the positives of the Ash era, the greenest of green offensive coordinators, Drew Maringer, and greenest of green head coaches in Chris Ash, they were smart enough to know that they needed to get the ball in the hands of Janarion Grant as early and often as possible. Unfortunately, that 2016 season, after that tremendous run against Iowa to get down to the goal line, he injured his ankle, and that ended his season and also impacted him his last season as well. That was a devastating injury. Take shots at Chris Ash all you want. He had that figured out. And you could raise the question that if Grant did not go down that season, 2016 season, his debut could have been certainly better than it was. So in regards to the record books at Rutgers for Janarion Grant, he finished his career ranked first in program history in kickoff return yardage, 2,857 yards. The next closest is Terrell Willis, who is a great player, great running back, great return specialist in his own right. He was just over 2,000 yards, so not even close there. In terms of 4th in punt return yards at 588. And one thing I think people maybe don't remember is that Grant is actually 3rd in program history in all-purpose yards, between rushing yards, passing yards, return yard. When his career was over in 2017, left tied for the NCAA all-time record for combined kick return touchdowns, meaning kickoff and punt. 8 in his career, 5 kickoffs, 3 punts. No longer has that record, but talk about an impact. And Janarion Grant wasted no time in letting Rutgers fans know how special he was, because the first time he ever touched the football, I remember it like yesterday, at Fresno State, the season opener, 2013, 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. He was just an absolute electric player. That Washington State game, that was just a crazy game that Rutgers ultimately lost, and kind of was the beginning of the end of that 2015 season on the field. He was tremendous. He set a school record, 337 all-purpose yards in that game, and became the first Rutgers player in the modern era to score both a kickoff return and a punt return in the same game, in that game against Washington State. I was there. I remember literally the black cloud coming over the stadium in the fourth quarter when they got the ball back after Grant gave them that lead. And then obviously some bad things happened off the field right after that game. And we all know prior to that game too, and that was the end of the flood era. But was not for a lack of trying from Janarion Grant, who had 4 special teams touchdowns total in that season. But overall, he certainly left his impact at Rutgers. 3rd all-time all-purpose yards, all-time kick return leader, 4th in punt return yards, most combined touchdowns, kickoffs, and punts in Rutgers history. School record for all-purpose yards in a game. He also has a single-season record for kickoff return yards. He actually has 2 of the 3 highest in program history. 2015, he had 984 return yards. Number 1, Joe LaFedge, who does not get enough credit for being a returner, was a great defensive player, but he has the number 2 total, 948 in 2010, and then Janarion Grant in 2014 had 910. So he's got 2 of the 3 highest single season totals. Some other great returners in Rutgers history in terms of kickoffs. In terms of yardage, you have Grant, number 1, Terrell Willis, number 2, Nate Jones, 2000-2003, Willie Foster, 03-06. He was fun to watch. He was number 4. Eric Young, who went on to play Major League Baseball. He's number 5 from the mid to late 80s. And then let's also give props to Aaron Cruikshank, who was an all Big Ten returner at Rutgers, prior to at Wisconsin as well. He's number 6. Joe LaFedge, number 7. Then from the late 80s, early 90s, Ron Allen, number 8. Jim Baker from the 60s is number 9. Dennis Thomas from 98 to 01, back in my day. I was at Rutgers, number 10. But Rutgers has some really good returners over the years, and none better than Janarion Grant, who's still doing it, now has 10 return touchdowns in his CFL career in his 5th season. Pretty remarkable there. Back-to-back weeks now. He won 2 Grey Cups, which is basically the Super Bowl in the CFL, with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Now he's in his 1st season with the Toronto Argonauts and making noise once again. He's 30 years old now. Obviously, the way his career ended at Rutgers with injuries, wasn't able to be the same player he was earlier in his career. Did ultimately make the Baltimore Ravens in 2018, and unfortunately had fumbles in back-to-back games in that September and was ultimately cut. They did sign him in the practice squad, but he never made it back. You hate that happened to him, and he's had some struggles in the CFL in terms of managing fumbles as well. But there's no doubting the fact that he is one of the most explosive returners in football history. And although he didn't make it in the NFL, he has gone on to have a tremendous career in the CFL. Will probably go down as the greatest returner ever. And remember, they had Rocket Ismail as well. If not number 1, I mean, he'll certainly be in consideration. But hopefully he has a few more years left in him to make that a moot argument. So just wanted to lavish some praise and appreciation on Janarion Grant, as we go through, as the years go by. And yes, I'm get a little more sentimental as I'm older. It's important to remember the past. Even during some bad years, Rutgers had some great players. And that was also part of it too. But besides Grant being hurt, just Rutgers not being good at the end of his career, he was just such a fun player, and he consumed a lot of us in terms of what his health and availability was that last year. And you just hope that he was able to break out, and he wasn't. But again, he's still kicking pretty well at the age of 30. And no, that's not old in life, but it's old in football. And he just had back-to-back weeks with return touchdowns. So shout out to Janarion Grant. And on Thursday, Rutgers announcing the 3 players they are bringing to Big Ten Media Days, which, can't believe it, is coming up very soon. They're bringing Kyle Monungai, Mohamed Toure, and Tyreen Powell, great representatives of the program. The Big Ten Media Day now with 18 teams is spread over 3 days from July 23rd to July 25th. Rutgers will be appearing as one of the first 6 teams on Tuesday, July 23rd. So Greg Schiano will have his press comments with the media, and then there'll be a bunch of other things in terms of the players talking. They'll be featured on BTN. We'll cover plenty of that. But just wanted to comment real quick, just in terms of obviously Monungai, the leading rusher in the Big Ten last year. It will be great to hear from him and see him get the spotlight within the conference at Media Days. Then you have Mo Toure, who I think very well could be the defensive MVP for this team. Monungai very well could be the offensive MVP. I mean, I think if things work out the way we hope them to, they probably will be, right? So makes sense there. Also, both great representatives. And then you have Tyreen Powell, who is very well spoken. I've interviewed Powell before, sending him to Media Day. Shiano's always said he's going to be ready for this season. I think it's a really positive sign that he is going to represent the team at Media Days. I'm sure Shiano and Powell will discuss his injury status, but certainly a good sign that he's going to be out representing the program in public. Obviously, we'll find out more at Media Days, but certainly a good sign that they're putting him out as a face of the program. You don't do that for a player that their health status is in serious question. So very good news there. Thanks for listening and watching once again. Had a bunch of pods this week. Had 3 on Monday on football recruiting, men's basketball, and also Rutgers 10 years in the Big Ten. Did that Corey Sanders appreciation on Thursday. Had that interview with Jordan Durkak last week if you missed that. If you have time, if you can ever follow, subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify. If you ever can leave a review on Apple, that would be amazing. Anything you could do, appreciate it. Even if it's just listen or watch, that is enough. And I'm very thankful for all of you that do on a pretty much daily basis at this point. It's July. We're in the dog days of summer. The heat has been crazy. I'm still grinding it out with content, and you're still grinding it out with me, and I really appreciate that. Hope everybody has a fantastic weekend.